The city buzzed with energy as Alex stepped off the train, their backpack slung casually over one shoulder. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly baked pastries from nearby cafes. It was Alex's first time in this historic European capital, a place known for its grand palaces, winding cobblestone streets, and rich history that seemed to seep out of every corner. They had no detailed itinerary, just a vague plan to explore and let the city surprise them. Alex wandered aimlessly, taking in the sights. Street performers juggled fire torches near the square, while artists sketched portraits for tourists seated on foldable chairs. Every turn offered something new. Flower markets bursting with color, ancient statues standing tall against the sky, and tiny bookshops tucked into alleyways. But nothing prepared Alex for what awaited them at the palace gates. As they approached the sprawling royal palace, a crowd was already gathering. People of all ages, families with children, couples holding hands, elderly visitors leaning on canes, stood eagerly, craning their necks toward the entrance. A sign nearby read, "Changing of the guard ceremony, 3 p.m. Intrigued." Alex joined the throng, curious about what made this event so special. At precisely 3 o'clock, the ceremony began. A group of guards marched onto the plaza, their movements synchronized like clockwork. Their uniforms were striking, bright red coats trimmed with gold embroidery, tall black hats adorned with plumes, and shiny boots reflecting the sunlight. Each step echoed across the courtyard, commanding respect and awe. The crowd fell silent, captivated by the spectacle. Alex watched intently, their eyes fixed on one particular guard stationed closest to the barrier. His posture was impeccable, his expression unreadable behind the shadow of his hat. He stood so still he could have been carved from stone. Something about him caught Alex's attention, a strange mix of curiosity and mischief brewing inside them. "Do you think they're even real?" Alex muttered under their breath, half-jokingly. They nudged the person next to them, a middle-aged woman clutching the camera. Like, are they actual humans or just mannequins? The woman chuckled nervously. "Of course they're human," she replied. "They're trained not to move, no matter what happens." That comment sparked an idea in Alex's mind. An idea that felt both thrilling and reckless. What if someone did try something unexpected? Would the guard really stay frozen, like some kind of living statue? Or would they crack under pressure? Alex glanced around at the sea of faces, tourists snapping photos, children pointing excitedly, locals chatting quietly, and suddenly felt emboldened. After all, wasn't travel supposed to be about breaking routines and trying things outside the norm? Without fully thinking it through, Alex took a step closer to the barrier. Their heart raced as adrenaline coursed through their veins. This was either going to be hilarious or horribly embarrassing, but deep down, Alex didn't care. For better or worse, they were about to find out exactly how far tradition would hold up when tested. As Alex stood there, their mind racing with the absurdity of what they were about to do, the crowd around them remained blissfully unaware. Tourists were busy snapping photos. Children giggled as they mimicked the guards' stiff poses, and older visitors whispered historical facts to each other. No one noticed the mischievous glint in Alex's eye, or the way their fingers twitched slightly, itching to act on the impulse building inside them. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped closer to the barrier separating the spectators from the guards. The guard nearest to them was still as a statue, his gloved hands resting perfectly at his sides, his chin tilted upward in an expression of stoic pride. His uniform gleamed under the sunlight, every detail meticulously crafted to convey authority and tradition. To Alex, it almost seemed too perfect, like a costume meant to be admired but never touched. "All right," Alex muttered under their breath, more to themselves than anyone else. "Let's see how unbreakable you really are." With that, Alex reached out and grabbed the ceremonial sash draped across the guard's chest. It was a bold, unexpected move, one that sent shockwaves through the crowd. For a split second, everything froze. Not just the guard, but the entire plaza. Then, chaos erupted. Gasps filled the air as people realized what was happening. Some thought it was part of the show, a quirky addition to the ceremony designed to entertain tourists. Others immediately understood it was something far less innocent. A man nearby shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" While a woman clutching her phone exclaimed, "Is this allowed?" Alex didn't stop. Encouraged by the initial lack of resistance from the guard, they tugged harder at the sash, trying to slide it off the guard's shoulder. The fabric resisted slightly, caught on the buttons of the uniform. But Alex persisted, their movements quick and determined. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, turning into a cacophony of disbelief and alarm. "What is wrong with you?" Someone yelled, their voice sharp with disapproval. "This isn't funny," another added, shaking their head in frustration. Despite the growing commotion, Alex couldn't help but feel a strange thrill. The guard hadn't moved an inch, his face remaining utterly impassive. It was surreal, almost comical, like trying to undress a mannequin in the middle of a museum. Alex's actions drew even more attention, with phones now pointed directly at them, capturing every awkward tug and pull. But then, things escalated. As Alex moved to unbutton the guard's jacket, several people in the crowd began shouting for them to stop. Parents covered their children's eyes, unsure whether to laugh or scold. One elderly man shook his head and muttered, "This is disgraceful." Meanwhile, others filmed the scene with glee, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment that would surely go viral. The guard, for his part, remained eerily composed. His training kicked in, forcing him to ignore the bizarre assault on his dignity. Inside, however, he was likely grappling with a mix of confusion and irritation. Who was this person, and why were they treating him like some kind of living exhibit? Yet he stayed rooted to the spot, a symbol of discipline in the face of utter absurdity. Security personnel stationed nearby finally sprang into action, realizing the situation had spiraled out of control. Two officers pushed their way through the crowd, their expressions stern. "Step away," one of them barked, his voice cutting through the noise. Alex hesitated for a moment, their hands still gripping the edge of the guard's jacket. But the game was up. Reluctantly, they released their hold and took a step back, raising their palms in mock surrender. The crowd erupted into a mix of cheers, groans, and nervous laughter. Little did Alex know, this impulsive act was about to make headlines and change their life forever. As the security officers closed in, Alex's heart raced. The adrenaline that had fueled their earlier actions was now replaced by a mix of panic and disbelief at what they'd just done. The crowd, once silent with shock, erupted into a flurry of reactions. Some people were laughing nervously, unsure whether to take the situation seriously or treat it as some kind of bizarre performance art. Others looked genuinely horrified, shaking their heads and muttering about disrespecting tradition. "Are you insane?" One woman shouted, clutching her phone tightly as she recorded the scene. Her voice carried over the murmurs of the crowd, sharp and accusatory. "Do you have any idea how disrespectful this is?" Alex glanced around, suddenly aware of just how many eyes were on them. Hundreds of tourists, locals, and even palace staff had turned their attention away from the ceremony and onto the unfolding chaos. Phones were held high, capturing every awkward moment. Social media feeds were already lighting up with snippets of the incident. Short videos showing Alex tugging at the guard's uniform, accompanied by captions like "Tourist goes wild" and "What just happened?" The two security officers reached Alex quickly, their faces stern and unamused. One of them grabbed Alex firmly by the arm, pulling them back from the barrier. "That's enough," he said sharply, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You need to come with us." Alex tried to protest, their voice shaky but defiant. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just wanted to see." "To see what?" The officer interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "If the guard is real. Because trust me, they're very real, and you've caused quite a scene." The sarcasm in his voice stung, But Alex didn't have time to respond. They were led away from the plaza, past rows of stunned onlookers who continued to film and whisper. The guard, still standing perfectly still despite the commotion, seemed almost otherworldly now, a symbol of unwavering discipline amidst complete madness. As Alex was escorted toward a nearby security booth, the crowd began to disperse, though not without plenty of lingering glances and commentary. Parents ushered their children away, explaining in hushed tones that sometimes people did strange things in public. Teenagers laughed and joked about the weird tourist who thought it was okay to mess with royalty. And older visitors shook their heads, lamenting the loss of respect for traditions that had stood for centuries. Back near the guards, palace officials conferred quietly, clearly shaken by the disruption. While the ceremony itself hadn't been entirely derailed, the mood had shifted dramatically. What was supposed to be a dignified display of history and culture had turned into a spectacle, one that would undoubtedly spark conversations for days to come. Meanwhile, online, the story was blowing up. Videos of Alex's antics spread like wildfire, shared across platforms, and viewed millions of times within hours. Comment sections buzzed with opinions. Some defended Alex, calling it a harmless prank gone wrong. Others condemned their behavior, labeling it as reckless and disrespectful. Memes started cropping up too, with photoshopped images of Alex trying to undress statues or shake hands with mannequins. By the time Alex reached the security booth, they realized the magnitude of what they'd done. This wasn't just a silly stunt anymore. It was a full-blown international incident. As they sat down on a hard chair inside the small room, surrounded by serious-faced officers jotting notes, Alex couldn't help but wonder, how did I get here? But deep down, they also felt a flicker of excitement. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Their impulsive decision had made waves far bigger than they ever could have imagined. The security booth was small and cramped, its walls painted a dull gray that seemed to suck the energy out of the room. Alex sat on a stiff wooden chair, their backpack placed awkwardly beside them, while two officers stood nearby, exchanging glances and scribbling notes. The air felt heavy with tension, but Alex couldn't help replaying the events in their mind. How quickly things had spiraled from curiosity to chaos. One of the officers finally spoke, his tone firm but measured. "Do you understand why we've brought you here?" he asked, leaning slightly forward. Alex hesitated, unsure where to begin. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble," they said, their voice quieter now, lacking the bravado from earlier. "It was, I don't know, a joke. Just something silly." "A joke?" The second officer chimed in, raising an eyebrow. "You think undressing a royal guard in front of hundreds of people is funny. It wasn't like that." Alex protested, sitting up straighter. "I just wanted to see if he'd react. Everyone says these guards never move, no matter what happens. So I thought, why not test it?" The officers exchanged another glance, this one laced with disbelief. "Test it," the first officer repeated, his voice rising slightly. "This isn't some kind of experiment or game. These ceremonies are centuries old. People come from all over the world to watch them, not to see tourists acting like clowns." Alex winced at the word clowns, feeling a mix of embarrassment and frustration. They hadn't meant for any of this to blow up so spectacularly. But deep down, they knew the officers were right. It was disrespectful, even if it hadn't started out that way. After a few more questions, the officers informed Alex they'd need to file a formal report. Depending on the palace's decision, charges could follow. Hearing those words hit Alex hard. Charges? For pulling on a uniform? It sounded absurd, but the gravity of the situation was sinking in fast. Meanwhile, outside the booth, the story continued to explode online. News outlets picked up the incident within hours, turning it into headline news. Headlines like "Tourist Tries to Undress Royal Guard" and "Palace Ceremony Interrupted by Bizarre Stunt" dominated websites and social media feeds. Videos of Alex's actions were everywhere, dissected frame by frame. Some viewers found humor in it, dubbing Alex the curious tourist. Others were outraged, calling for consequences to preserve the sanctity of tradition. Back at the palace, officials held an emergency meeting. While they couldn't deny the disruption caused by Alex's behavior, they also understood the value of restraint. Overreacting might only fuel further mockery, turning the incident into an even bigger spectacle. After much deliberation, they decided to press charges, but ones that balanced accountability with fairness. Alex would face penalties for public disturbance and disrespecting national symbols, but nothing overly severe. By late afternoon, Alex was released from the security booth with instructions to appear in court at a later date. As they stepped back into the open air, the weight of everything crashed down on them. Reporters swarmed the area, shoving microphones in their face and firing off rapid-fire questions. What made you do it? Do you regret your actions? How does it feel to be infamous? Alex blinked, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. They'd mumbled a vague apology about not meaning harm and hurried away, eager to escape the spotlight, for now, at least. That night, alone in their hotel room, Alex scrolled through their phone, watching the endless stream of memes and comments about their stunt. There were jokes comparing them to cartoon characters, debates about whether they deserved sympathy or scorn, and countless replays of the video. It was surreal, almost dreamlike, to see themselves become a global talking point. As Alex set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling, they realized something important. Life had changed forever. Whether for better or worse, their impulsive act had thrust them into the center of a cultural storm, and there was no going back. The courtroom was packed on the day of Alex's trial. Reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers filled every available seat, their whispers creating a low hum that buzzed through the room. The judge entered with a stern expression, adjusting their glasses as they took their place at the bench. It was clear from the start that this wasn't just any ordinary hearing. This was a media circus, a public spectacle fueled by weeks of relentless coverage. Alex sat nervously in the defendant's chair, dressed in simple clothes that contrasted sharply with the chaotic energy surrounding them. Their lawyer leaned over to whisper words of reassurance, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being under a microscope. Every eye in the room seemed fixed on them, dissecting their every move. Cameras flashed as journalists jockeyed for the best angle, capturing photos that would soon appear alongside headlines like "Tourist Faces Justice" for Royal Guard stunt. The prosecution began its case, painting Alex's actions as reckless and disrespectful. "This isn't about curiosity or humor," the prosecutor argued, pacing back and forth in front of the judge. "It's about undermining centuries of tradition. Guards are symbols of national pride, not props for someone's amusement." The crowd murmured in agreement, some nodding firmly while others scribbled notes furiously. Alex felt a pang of guilt listening to the arguments. They hadn't intended to insult anyone. They'd acted on impulse, but hearing it framed this way made them realize how serious their actions truly were. When it was time for Alex's defense, their lawyer stood up, speaking calmly but confidently. "My client didn't set out to cause harm," they said, turning to face the judge. "They're young, adventurous, and admittedly impulsive. But let's be honest, this incident has sparked conversations worldwide. People are talking about our traditions, our ceremonies, and even the role of authority in modern society. Isn't there value in that?" The courtroom erupted into murmurs again, this time divided. Some people nodded thoughtfully, considering the idea that Alex's stunt might have unintentionally highlighted deeper cultural questions. Others rolled their eyes, convinced it was just an excuse to justify bad behavior. As the trial progressed, Alex was called to testify. Nervously gripping the stand, they spoke honestly about their intentions, or lack thereof. "I didn't think it through," they admitted, their voice trembling slightly. "I saw the guard standing so still and thought, what if I tested it? Would they react? I never imagined it would get this big. All I wanted was to see something unexpected happen." Their honesty seemed to resonate with some in the room, especially when they expressed genuine remorse. "I respect traditions," Alex added earnestly. "I really do. And I'm sorry if I offended anyone. That wasn't my goal." After hours of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict: guilty of public disturbance and disrespecting national symbols. However, instead of imposing jail time, the court sentenced Alex to community service and a hefty fine. The judge emphasized the importance of learning from mistakes, urging Alex to use this experience as a chance to grow. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Alex once again, eager for a reaction. This time, Alex handled it differently. "I messed up," they said simply, looking directly into the cameras. "I acted without thinking, and I regret that. But I hope people can see this as a lesson, not just for me, but for everyone, to think before we act." The statement struck a chord with many. While some critics remained unforgiving, others softened their stance, appreciating Alex's willingness to take responsibility. Social media lit up with mixed reactions, but one thing was certain: Alex's story had become more than just a viral moment. It had evolved into a conversation starter about accountability, tradition, and the power of second chances. As Alex walked away from the courthouse, they knew life wouldn't go back to normal anytime soon. But amidst the chaos, they also felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this strange chapter could lead to something meaningful after all. The days following the trial were a whirlwind for Alex. Their name was everywhere, on news websites, late-night talk shows, and even morning radio programs. The media couldn't get enough of the Royal Guard incident, as it had come to be known. Some outlets portrayed Alex as a reckless troublemaker, while others framed them as an accidental cultural provocateur. Regardless of the narrative, one thing was clear: Alex had become a household name. At first, Alex struggled to adjust to their newfound fame. Walking down the street felt like navigating a minefield, with strangers stopping them to either congratulate or scold them. Social media notifications flooded in nonstop. Messages ranged from supportive comments, "You're living your truth," to harsh criticism, "You disrespected an entire nation." It was overwhelming, to say the least. But amidst the chaos, opportunities began pouring in. A popular podcast invited Alex to share their side of the story. A book publisher offered them a deal to write about their experiences. Even a comedy show wanted them to appear as a guest, joking that they could teach people how to test authority. At first, Alex hesitated. They hadn't sought out this kind of attention, and the thought of capitalizing on their mistake made them uneasy. Their lawyer, however, encouraged them to embrace it, at least partially. "Look," he said during one of their meetings, "you've already become part of the conversation. Why not use this platform to say something meaningful? People are listening to you now, whether you like it or not." That advice stuck with Alex. Slowly, they started accepting interviews and appearances, but with a twist. They used these moments to reflect on what they'd learned. During a live podcast episode, Alex spoke candidly about accountability. "I didn't realize how my actions would affect so many people," they admitted, their voice steady despite the nerves. "It's easy to act impulsively when you're caught up in the moment, but there's always fallout. I'm trying to own my mistakes and grow from them." Listeners appreciated Alex's honesty, and soon, public perception began to shift. While some critics remained vocal, others softened their stance, acknowledging Alex's efforts to make amends. Memes that once mocked Alex now included captions like, "Even chaos can lead to growth," or "Lesson learned. Don't tug on tradition." Meanwhile, back in the city where it all happened, things were changing too. The palace implemented stricter security measures around ceremonial events, ensuring no one could replicate Alex's stunt. Guards were instructed to step aside immediately if anyone tried anything similar, a move both practical and symbolic. Palace officials also released a statement thanking the public for their support, emphasizing the importance of preserving traditions while remaining open to dialogue. For Alex, life began settling into a new rhythm. They completed their community service hours at a local museum dedicated to history and culture, a fitting punishment given the circumstances. Working there gave Alex a deeper appreciation for the very traditions they'd once dismissed so casually. They spent hours learning about the significance of ceremonies like the changing of the guard, realizing how much effort went into maintaining them. By the end of their sentence, Alex felt transformed. What had started as a spontaneous, ill-conceived prank had turned into a crash course in responsibility and perspective. They weren't proud of what they'd done, but they were grateful for the lessons it taught them. And though the world might never forget the day a tourist tried to undress a royal guard, Alex hoped people would remember something else: the power of owning your mistakes and using them to grow. As they boarded a plane back home, Alex looked out the window at the city below. It had been a wild ride, full of highs and lows, triumphs and regrets. But one thing was certain: they were leaving with more than just souvenirs. They were carrying a story, one they'd carry for the rest of their life. Months passed, and the world moved on to new headlines, but the memory of Alex's infamous stunt lingered in unexpected ways. Back home, life slowly returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be for someone who had briefly become an international sensation. Friends and family treated Alex differently now, some teasing them good-naturedly about their 5 minutes of fame, while others quietly marveled at how they'd handled the aftermath. Alex, however, wasn't content to let the incident fade into obscurity. The experience had changed them in profound ways, forcing them to confront not only their own impulsiveness, but also the weight of tradition and public perception. Sitting alone one evening, scrolling through old photos from their trip, Alex realized something important. They didn't want this story to define them solely as the person who caused chaos. If anything, they wanted it to serve as a starting point, a catalyst for something bigger. Inspired by their time working at the museum during community service, Alex decided to channel their energy into something positive. They began volunteering with organizations that promoted cultural education, helping bridge gaps between modern audiences and historical traditions. Whether it was leading workshops for students or speaking at community events, Alex found joy in sharing stories that celebrated heritage without stifling curiosity. Word spread quickly about Alex's transformation. Local news outlets picked up on their efforts, running features that highlighted how far they'd come since the viral incident. One article even dubbed them the tourist-turned-teacher, praising their ability to turn a mistake into a mission. Social media, once a source of relentless scrutiny, became a platform for Alex to advocate for thoughtful exploration of culture. Their posts often included reflections like "Traditions matter, but so does understanding why they matter," or "Curiosity is great. Respect makes it better." Meanwhile, back in the city where it all began, the palace guard involved in the incident eventually retired. To everyone's surprise, he agreed to sit down for a rare interview shortly after leaving his post. Dressed in civilian clothes, he spoke candidly about the day Alex approached him. "At first, I thought it was some sort of prank," he admitted with a small smile. "But then I realized it was just human nature. People are curious. Sometimes they act before they think." When asked if he held any grudges, the former guard shook his head. "No, not really. It's part of the job to expect the unexpected. Besides," he added with a chuckle, "it gave me quite the story to tell my grandchildren." The interview went viral, drawing praise for its lighthearted yet reflective tone. Many noted how the guard's grace under pressure mirrored Alex's eventual willingness to take responsibility. Together, their responses painted a picture of mutual growth, one born out of an absurd moment that neither could have predicted. As years went by, the incident took on a life of its own, becoming a quirky footnote in cultural history. Tour guides near the palace would occasionally mention it during tours, eliciting laughter from visitors. And remember, they'd joke, "Don't try to undress the guards. They're very attached to their uniforms." Even memes about the event softened over time, evolving from mocking jabs to playful reminders about respecting boundaries. For Alex, the legacy of that day was bittersweet, but ultimately rewarding. While they never forgot the embarrassment of standing in that courtroom or the sting of online criticism, they also couldn't deny the silver linings. The experience had pushed them to grow, to seek meaning beyond themselves, and to connect with people in ways they never imagined. One evening, sitting on their porch with a cup of tea, Alex reflected on everything that had happened. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the sky. Life had thrown them a curveball, no doubt about it, but somehow they'd managed to hit it out of the park. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: they were ready for whatever came next. Years later, Alex found themselves sitting in a cozy cafe, sipping coffee and watching tourists stroll by. The city had changed since their last visit. New shops had opened, streets were busier, but the palace remained as majestic as ever, standing tall against the backdrop of a cloudy sky. It was hard to believe that this place, once the stage for their most infamous moment, now felt almost comforting. Alex had returned for the first time since the incident, not out of nostalgia but because they'd been invited to speak at a cultural symposium hosted near the palace. The event aimed to explore the balance between tradition and modernity, a theme that resonated deeply with Alex's journey. As they prepared their speech, memories of that chaotic day flooded back. The flicker of mischief in their eyes, the gasps of the crowd, the stern faces of security officers. But instead of cringing, Alex smiled softly. That moment, though embarrassing, had shaped who they were today. The symposium drew a diverse audience: historians, artists, students, and even a few curious locals eager to hear from someone who had once disrupted their beloved ceremony. When Alex took the stage, the room fell silent, all eyes on them. They began by recounting the story, not shying away from the awkward details, but framing it as a lesson in human curiosity gone awry. "I didn't set out to challenge tradition," Alex said, pausing to let their words sink in. "But looking back, I see how my actions sparked conversations about what traditions mean to us, and why we protect them." The audience listened intently, nodding along as Alex spoke about accountability, growth, and finding meaning in mistakes. They shared anecdotes from their volunteer work, describing how teaching others about culture had given them a sense of purpose. "Traditions aren't just rules or rituals," Alex explained. "They're stories passed down through generations, and while those stories deserve respect, they also invite us to ask questions, to engage with them in meaningful ways." When Alex finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. People lined up afterward to thank them, many sharing their own thoughts about balancing innovation with heritage. One elderly woman approached, her hands clasped tightly around a cane. "You've come such a long way," she said warmly. "Your story reminds me that even our missteps can lead to something beautiful." After the symposium, Alex decided to visit the palace one last time. Standing outside the gates, they watched as another changing of the guard ceremony unfolded. This time, they stayed behind the barrier, observing quietly. The guards marched with the same precision, their uniforms gleaming under the sunlight. Tourists snapped photos, children pointed excitedly, and everything seemed exactly as it should be. A young boy standing nearby tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Why do they stand so still?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. His mother laughed, bending down to explain. Watching the scene unfold, Alex felt a pang of gratitude for the lessons learned, the bridges rebuilt, and the realization that life is full of second chances. As they walked away from the palace, Alex paused to glance over their shoulder one final time. Somewhere inside, they knew the story of the tourist who tried to undress a royal guard would live on, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of the power of reflection and redemption. Life, much like tradition, wasn't static. It evolved, adapted, and grew stronger with each passing year. And Alex, once an impulsive traveler, now carried that truth with pride.